It was the kind of night that felt like it would never end. The sky outside was thick with clouds, the kind that could smother a person with its weight. Inside the small apartment, Amber sat in the dim light of the kitchen, staring down at the untouched cup of tea that had long since gone cold. The stillness was suffocating, and her hands, trembling slightly, betrayed the calm facade she tried to maintain. Amber's life hadn't always been this way. At one point, she was full of dreams, of adventure, of the possibility of becoming something more than just the girl from a broken home. She had imagined a future that was vibrant, filled with love and laughter. But somewhere along the way, the colors had faded. And now, sitting here in this apartment, she felt as though her soul had been drained to a dull gray. It had started subtly. Small things she brushed off, like his impatience when she didn't pick up his favorite coffee on her way home, or the cutting remarks about her appearance. But soon, the small things began to grow into something darker. His temper, once easily controlled, had become more unpredictable. The quiet rage simmering beneath the surface had spilled over into shouting, into accusations. Amber had learned to keep her head down, to stay out of his way. The first time he raised his hand to her, it felt like an earthquake, a shock so violent that it shattered her sense of self. She hadn't been prepared for it. It had just been a disagreement, one that seemed trivial in hindsight. But when his palm had struck her cheek, everything changed. The shame had been instant and overwhelming. She had cried not just because of the pain, but because she had stayed. She hadn't left when she should have. But Amber was still there. And the reason for that was a secret she kept buried deep inside. She was pregnant. And now, at 22, she had found herself at a crossroads that felt impossible to navigate. She couldn't stay. She couldn't bring a child into this life, but she also couldn't seem to leave, not with the way he had manipulated her, trapped her in a web of lies, guilt, and shame. She wasn't sure who she was anymore, let alone who she was supposed to be for her baby. Her phone buzzed on the counter, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a message from her best friend, Claire. "Amber, I'm worried about you. Please let me help. You don't have to do this alone." Claire had been there for her through everything, the late-night talks, the tears, the comforting words when Amber had started to drift away, isolating herself from the world. She was the one person who still believed Amber had a chance at something more, something better. But Amber couldn't burden her friend. She was already too much to deal with. She had to fix this on her own. She had to protect her child. Amber's gaze shifted to the small bundle of clothes on the chair beside her, her baby's first outfit. It had been a gift from Claire, soft and yellow with tiny stars stitched across the fabric. It seemed too small for what Amber was feeling, too small for the future that was now set before her. As Amber picked it up, she felt a sudden surge of emotion, a wave of fear, but also determination. She wasn't just carrying a child, she was carrying her hope, her future, and the promise that no matter how hard things seemed, she could make it through. But how? How could she leave when everything felt so impossible? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door opening. He was home. The heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway, and Amber quickly wiped her tears, standing up and straightening her clothes. She didn't have the luxury of breakdowns anymore. Not now. "Amber." His voice came, low and menacing. She heard the familiar thud of his boots hitting the floor as he moved through the apartment. "Where is my dinner?" It was a simple question, but Amber knew better than to give a simple answer. She turned to face him, her heart pounding in her chest. The next few minutes, she knew, would be the same as always, a routine she could recite in her sleep. But something had shifted inside her. She had made a decision. "I'm leaving," she whispered to herself, though she knew it wasn't just an affirmation for her, it was a promise. And with that promise, she knew it would be the beginning of something terrifying, but necessary. But would she find the courage to leave him, or would the chains of guilt and fear continue to bind her? As Amber stood there, she felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her, a feeling she couldn't shake. Could she really walk away from everything she knew, even for the sake of her baby. The door slammed behind him with a force that made Amber flinch. His presence filled the apartment, suffocating the small space, and for a moment she thought she might choke on the weight of it. His footsteps were heavy as he moved into the kitchen, his voice rising in an angry tirade about how everything in the apartment was always wrong. Amber had long learned to let the words wash over her, pretending they didn't hurt, pretending they didn't matter. But tonight was different. "I'm not cooking tonight," she said before she could stop herself, her voice small but firm. The silence that followed was thick with disbelief. He turned slowly, his face contorting into an expression Amber had come to dread, the look that meant he was about to snap. "What did you say?" His voice was a low growl, and Amber felt her stomach twist. She forced herself to breathe, to keep her head steady. She could feel her heart racing, but she wouldn't back down this time. She couldn't. "I'm not cooking tonight. I'm done." His eyes narrowed, studying her with the intensity of a predator. For a moment, she wondered if he would lash out again, if this was it, the moment when he would finish breaking her. But then, just as quickly, the anger seemed to dissipate, replaced with a look of confusion, almost like he couldn't understand what she was saying. "You're done?" he echoed, a humorless laugh escaping his lips. "What, you think you're just going to walk out of here, leave me? You think you can just abandon everything?" Amber felt her throat tighten as the words rushed out before she could stop them. "I'm leaving," she repeated, her voice shaking with the weight of the truth she had just uttered. "I'm leaving you, and I'm leaving this life behind. I'm pregnant, and I'm not going to raise this child in this mess. I can't." He took a step toward her, his eyes widening with something akin to panic now. He grabbed her arm, his grip tight but not painful. "You don't know what you're saying, Amber," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You can't leave me. You're nothing without me. You think anyone else is going to want you? With a kid? You'll be a joke." His words were meant to hurt her, to crush whatever resolve she had left, but they didn't have the effect he expected. For the first time in a long while, Amber felt something inside her stir, a small flicker of defiance. "I'm not nothing," she said, meeting his gaze with newfound strength. "And this baby is not a joke. It's my future. It's my choice." His eyes searched hers, as if looking for a weakness, a crack in the facade. But Amber held her ground. She didn't want to cry anymore. She didn't want to feel small or insignificant. She wanted to be someone her child could be proud of, someone strong, someone who could survive. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. And then he let go of her arm with a dismissive wave, his face returning to his usual mask of indifference. "Fine, leave," he spat, "but don't come crawling back when you realize you can't make it on your own. You won't last 5 minutes out there." Amber didn't respond. She couldn't. There was nothing left to say to him. Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the middle of the room. Her hands were shaking as she reached for the small bag she had packed earlier that day. Inside were just the basics, a few changes of clothes, her ID, and a small amount of cash she'd managed to hide away over the past few months. As she stepped out the door and into the cool night air, she felt a strange mixture of fear and freedom swirling inside her. She had left. She had finally done it. But as she walked down the empty street, her heart pounding in her chest, she couldn't help but wonder if she had made the right choice. Where would she go now? How could she possibly do this on her own? Her feet moved automatically, carrying her further from the apartment, further from the life she had once known. The streetlights flickered above her, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly into the night. It felt like the whole world was watching her, waiting for her to fail. But she couldn't fail. She couldn't go back. Amber's mind was a whirlwind of uncertainty and fear, but amidst it all, there was one thought that kept pushing through. This is for you, little one. No matter what happened, she would find a way to make it work. She had to, for her baby, for herself. She wasn't sure where the next step would take her, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope, a promise that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow could be better than today. As Amber walked into the unknown, she couldn't shake the feeling that her real journey was just beginning. Would she find the courage to rebuild her life from scratch, or would the weight of her past drag her back into the darkness? The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: she couldn't go back. Not now. Amber walked for what felt like hours, the soles of her shoes scraping against the cold, cracked sidewalk. The world around her seemed to blur into a haze of shadows, the streetlights flickering like the last bits of hope she clung to. With each step, the weight of her decision grew heavier. But there was also a strange sense of freedom, of shedding the past like a skin that no longer fit. She didn't have a plan, not really. She hadn't thought that far ahead. All she knew was that she couldn't stay. The familiar apartment, the routines, the empty promises, she had to leave them behind. Her mind was a storm of doubt and fear, but deep inside, a small, quiet voice kept repeating the same mantra. You can do this. She paused for a moment, leaning against a lamppost, trying to steady her breath. The baby inside her stirred, a small flutter of life that reminded her of what was at stake. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel the weight of the responsibility. This child was going to be her future, her reason for fighting. Amber had no idea where she was headed. She didn't even have a place to stay. She was running on instinct, driven by the need to escape. She thought of Claire, her best friend, but the thought of asking for help made her chest tighten. She didn't want to be a burden. She had to figure this out on her own. She couldn't let anyone else get caught up in her mess. Her phone buzzed again, and she glanced down at the screen, expecting another message from Claire. But instead, it was a text from her mother. Amber, I've been thinking about you. I know you're scared, but please, don't make any decisions you'll regret. We're family, and we'll help you no matter what. Just know that you don't have to face this alone. Amber's heart clenched as she read the words. Her mother had always been the one person who had shown her unconditional love, the one person who believed in her when no one else did. But Amber couldn't go back home. She couldn't tell her mother what had been happening. Not yet. It was too painful, too complicated. She quickly tucked the phone back in her pocket, blinking away the tears that threatened to fall. She was already alone. She had already made her choice, and there was no turning back. Minutes later, her feet led her to the bus stop. It was a quiet intersection, the kind of place where people came and went without ever really noticing one another. Amber's eyes darted to the schedule posted on the sign. The next bus to downtown was due in 5 minutes. It was as good a direction as any, she figured. She sat down on the bench, wrapping her arms around her for warmth. The cold air bit at her skin, but it was nothing compared to the coldness she had felt in that apartment. She could still hear his words echoing in her mind. You'll never make it. You're nothing without me. Amber shook her head, refusing to let his words dictate her life any longer. She was not nothing. She was a mother now, and that meant something. The bus pulled up, the doors opening with a mechanical hiss. Amber stood and climbed aboard, settling into a seat near the back. The bus lurched forward, and for the first time since she'd left, she allowed herself to relax. It wasn't much, but the rhythmic motion of the bus moving through the city gave her a brief sense of calm. As the bus rumbled through the city, Amber let her mind wander, searching for answers to the questions that had been haunting her for weeks. Where would she go? Who could she trust? And most importantly, how could she raise a child when she didn't even know how to take care of herself? The answer wasn't clear, but as the bus passed familiar landmarks, the coffee shop where she used to meet Claire, the park where she had spent countless hours reading books and dreaming of a different life, Amber realized that maybe the answer didn't need to come all at once. Maybe the first step was simply to keep going, just take one step at a time. And maybe, just maybe, the world would open up in ways she couldn't even imagine yet. The bus reached the downtown area, and Amber disembarked into the bustling streets. People walked past her, oblivious to her internal turmoil. She could have been anyone, just another person in the crowd. But in that moment, she was more than that. She was a woman on a mission, one that wasn't just about survival, but about creating a new life, one she could stand tall and proud, not for anyone else, but for herself and her baby. She pulled her coat tighter around her, and without thinking, she began to walk. The uncertainty of where to go didn't seem as overwhelming anymore. There was a strange kind of clarity in her confusion. She would find a way. She always had. As Amber walked down the street, her thoughts shifted to what lay ahead. She didn't know what her future would look like, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to face it alone. As the city buzzed around her, Amber couldn't help but wonder, was she strong enough to rebuild her life from the ground up? Would she find the support she needed, or would the world continue to feel like an endless maze? One thing was certain. She was walking into the unknown, and only time would tell if she could find her way. Amber's feet ached as she continued down the crowded city streets, the weight of her decision still pressing on her chest. The unfamiliarity of it all, the hustle of downtown, the constant noise of traffic, the bright lights and flashing signs was overwhelming. But despite the chaos around her, she felt a strange sense of clarity. She was out. She was free. At least, that's what she tried to tell herself. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking the rhythm of her thoughts. Amber took it out, her heart skipping a beat when she saw that it was another message from her mother. Amber, please, just let me know you're okay. I don't care about anything else right now. I'm here for you, whatever you need. Amber's throat tightened, and for a brief moment, she felt a pang of guilt. She hadn't meant to shut her out, but she had no idea how to explain what had been happening. She couldn't bear the thought of her mother knowing how deep the wounds were, how complicated everything had become. She typed back a quick response. I'm fine, Mom. I just need some time to figure things out. I'll be okay. She sent it before she could second-guess herself. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the full truth either. The truth was, Amber had no idea what to do next. She didn't know where to go, how to start over, or how to take care of herself, let alone the baby growing inside her. The thought of returning to her apartment, of facing him again, was unbearable. But where would she go? She couldn't stay on the streets, not for long. She wasn't prepared for that kind of life. The idea of sleeping in shelters, relying on the kindness of strangers, those were the things she had tried so hard to avoid. She had heard about a few places, some women's shelters and programs for pregnant women, but she had never been to one. She didn't know if she'd even qualify or if they'd accept someone like her, someone with no place to call home, no support system. Amber's phone buzzed again. It was Claire. Amber, please talk to me. I don't care if you're mad at me. I just want to help. Amber sighed, the weight of her emotions settling heavily on her shoulders. Claire had always been there for her. She had been Amber's rock, the one person who never judged, who always offered a shoulder to cry on. But even now, as much as she wanted to reach out, Amber knew she couldn't lean on her friend. Not like this. She couldn't burden Claire with her mess. She typed a quick reply, trying to keep it brief and non-committal. I'll be okay, Claire. I just need some space. Thanks for understanding. She knew it was a lie. She wasn't okay, but she couldn't admit that. Not yet. Amber found herself walking past a small coffee shop. The warm glow from the inside caught her attention, and she hesitated for a moment before stepping in. It was quiet inside, the hum of conversations mixed with the soft clink of mugs and the sound of milk steaming. She walked to the counter, her hands shaking as she ordered a simple black coffee, trying to keep the transaction as impersonal as possible. The barista, a woman with short dark hair and kind eyes, handed Amber the cup with a soft smile. Here you go. Stay warm, she said. Thanks, Amber mumbled, her voice barely above a whisper. She sat by the window, watching the world outside continue its relentless march forward. As she sipped the coffee, the heat spread through her chest, and she began to feel just a little bit more grounded. For a few minutes, she allowed herself to breathe, to just exist without the weight of the past pressing down on her. But then the reality of her situation crept back in. She couldn't stay in a coffee shop forever. She needed a plan. She needed a place to go. Her mind raced, trying to think of some kind of solution, and then it hit her. The old women's shelter that she had heard about, a place called the Hope Center. It wasn't far from where she was, just a few blocks down. She had heard it was a safe place for women in her situation, offering shelter, food, and support for women who were pregnant or dealing with domestic violence. The Hope Center. It sounded like a lifeline, a way out. Amber finished her coffee in one long gulp, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. She grabbed her bag and headed out the door, her mind now focused on one thing: reaching that shelter. She couldn't keep wandering, not when there was a possibility of safety, of support. It was her first step, and it had to be the right one. As she walked down the street, her pace quickened. The thought of a safe place gave her a sense of urgency. She needed to take control. She needed to move forward, one step at a time. But as she rounded the corner, she hesitated. The door to the shelter loomed ahead, a promise of safety, but also a reminder of how much she had lost. What if she didn't belong there? What if they turned her away? Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. As Amber stepped into the shelter, she couldn't shake the doubt gnawing at her. Was she truly ready to face her fears? To admit that she couldn't do this on her own? The shelter offered a chance at safety, but would it be the refuge she desperately needed? Or just another place where she'd have to hide from the life she was trying to escape? The door creaked shut behind Amber with a soft thud. The smell of cleaning products and fresh linens filled the air as she stepped into the quiet, sterile lobby of the Hope Center. She paused for a moment, her heart racing in her chest. There was a reception desk at the far end, a woman behind it typing away at a computer. The room felt so clean, so organized, nothing like the chaos she had left behind. Amber took a deep breath and walked up to the counter, trying to steady her shaking hands. "Hi," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the stillness of the room. I was wondering if you had a place for someone who needs help." The woman behind the desk looked up, offering a warm, welcoming smile. She was older, perhaps in her 40s, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. She had the kind of face that made you feel safe, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Amber felt the tiniest flicker of relief. "Of course," the woman said, standing up and walking around the desk to greet her. "What's your name, dear?" "Amber," she replied, her voice trembling just a little. "Amber Stone." The woman extended her hand and Amber shook it gently. "Nice to meet you, Amber. I'm Mary, and I'm the intake coordinator here. You're in the right place. Let me take a look at what we have available." Amber followed Mary through a narrow hallway to a small office where she was asked to fill out some paperwork. Basic questions about her situation, her health, and her needs. She sat at the desk, her hands moving mechanically as she answered questions. It felt like a blur. Names, dates, boxes to check, questions she had never asked herself out loud. She tried to focus on the task at hand, but her mind kept wandering back to the life she had left behind. Was it really possible to leave all that behind? Was it really over? Mary came back after a few minutes, holding a folder in her hands. She looked at Amber with a gentle, knowing gaze, as though she could read the fear and uncertainty in Amber's eyes without her saying a word. "Well, Amber," Mary said, "I have a bed for you. We have a small dormitory for women who are pregnant, and it's quieter, more private than the general shelter. It's not far from here. If you'd like, I can show you the room." Amber blinked, her heart pounding in her chest. A bed. A room. A real place to stay. Her throat tightened. This was it. This was the first time she had truly felt like she might be able to breathe again. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Mary smiled warmly. "You're welcome, Amber. You're safe here." For the first time in weeks, Amber felt a tear slip down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, embarrassed by her vulnerability, but Mary didn't seem to notice. She simply led Amber through the building to the small dormitory in the back. The room was simple but clean, with 2 twin beds pushed against opposite walls. There was a small dresser, a lamp, and a window with a view of the city. It wasn't much, but it was more than Amber had dared hoped for. "This is your space for as long as you need it," Mary said, setting down the folder on one of the beds. There are a few other women here, but they're all at different stages of their pregnancies, so the atmosphere is very calm. You'll have access to medical care, counseling, and free natal classes while you're here. There's also a kitchen downstairs if you'd like to cook or just get something to eat. Amber looked around the room, feeling a strange mixture of gratitude and disbelief. She was here. She had actually done it. She had taken the first step towards rebuilding her life. "I don't know how to thank you," she said quietly. Mary shook her head. "There's no need for thanks, Amber. This is what we're here for. Just take care of yourself and your baby. That's all you need to focus on right now." Amber nodded, overwhelmed by the kindness in Mary's voice. Mary's expression softened. "Why don't you settle in? We have a group meeting in an hour where you can meet the other women if you'd like. And if you need anything at all, don't hesitate to ask." As Mary left the room, Amber closed the door behind her, then stood in the middle of the small space, taking it all in. She was safe, for now at least, and she had time to figure out what came next. She sat down on the bed, her hands resting on the small bump in her stomach. She didn't know how she was going to raise this baby on her own. She didn't know what her future would look like, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like maybe she could handle it. Her heart swelled as she thought about the baby, her little one. This was her chance to change everything, to do it right. There was a knock at the door, interrupting her thoughts. "Amber?" It was Mary again. "I just wanted to let you know that we have dinner starting soon. If you're hungry, feel free to come down whenever you're ready." Amber smiled, grateful for the thoughtfulness. "I'll be there in a few minutes. Thank you." Mary smiled back and nodded before walking away. Amber stood and went to the window, looking out at the skyline of the city. It was still bustling, still moving, but for the first time, she didn't feel like she was drowning in it. There was a way forward, a way to build a life, even if it seemed impossible at times. She wasn't alone anymore. Amber glanced at the bed, at the tiny outfit she had packed for her baby, soft, yellow with little stars, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe that she could be the mother her child deserved. As Amber stood in the room, feeling the faint stir of her baby inside her, she realized her journey was far from over. But was this new place really the sanctuary she needed, or was it just a temporary refuge from the life she had left behind? And more importantly, would she ever find the strength to face her past and the future waiting for her outside these walls? The evening passed quietly at the Hope Center. Amber had walked downstairs to the dining room, where a handful of women were already sitting around a long wooden table. The air was filled with the smell of soup and bread, simple but comforting. Amber hesitated at the door, feeling like an intruder into this tight-knit group of women who seemed so much more at ease than she felt. "Come on in," a voice called from across the room, and Amber turned to see a young woman with short, curly hair waving her over. "You must be Amber. I'm Ellie. Sit with us." Amber smiled, grateful for the warm welcome, and made her way to the table, sitting down beside Ellie. The room was cozy, with soft lighting casting a warm glow on the simple decor. There were 6 women in total, some older than Amber, some around her age, each with a unique story that she could only imagine. They all had that one thing in common. Each one was carrying a child. Each one had found their way to this place because life had knocked them down in ways they hadn't expected. "Don't worry," Ellie said, her voice a little quieter now. "We were all nervous at first too, but trust me, this place can help you. It helped me." Amber looked at her with cautious eyes. Ellie's presence was calming, her demeanor open and understanding, but Amber couldn't help but feel a wave of uncertainty rise inside her. Would this really be different? Could this place, these women, really help her change? "So, what's your story?" Ellie asked gently. Amber hesitated, her mind running through all the things she had tried to bury, the late-night fights, the manipulation, the bruises she'd hidden under layers of makeup, the desperate loneliness that had surrounded her for so long. It wasn't something she wanted to revisit. I was with someone," Amber began slowly, her voice shaking a little as the words came out. He wasn't always like this. He was nice at first, but over time, things changed, and now I'm here." Ellie nodded, her eyes soft with understanding. "You don't have to share more if you're not ready," she said, "but we're all here for you when you are." The woman sitting across from them, a quiet figure with a large bump under her loose-fitting dress, looked up at Amber and smiled kindly. "My name's Sarah. I'm just a few weeks ahead of you, actually, but I know what you're going through. When I first got here, I felt like I had no place in the world. But trust me, this place can be your starting point. It's not just about shelter. It's about learning to stand on your own 2 feet." Amber swallowed hard, feeling the lump in her throat tighten. She didn't know if she could stand. The thought of going back out there into the world where everything felt uncertain was terrifying. Ellie, sensing Amber's hesitation, quickly changed the subject, offering a bit of lightness to the conversation. "So, what's your baby going to be? Have you thought of names yet?" Amber smiled weakly, feeling a flutter in her stomach as she thought about her child. A small, comforting warmth spread through her chest. "I think it's a boy," Amber said softly. "I don't know why, but I just feel like it's a boy. I've been thinking about names. Matthew, maybe. I think it means gift from God." The others at the table nodded, murmuring words of approval, and Amber felt a small, hesitant sense of peace settle over her. "Matthew's a beautiful name," Sarah said with a smile. "It's a perfect choice." The conversation turned to other topics: babies, advice, what the weeks ahead would look like. Amber listened more than she spoke, taking in their words like a sponge. As the evening wore on, Amber found herself feeling more and more at ease. The women were kind, their stories raw but laced with hope. They shared their experiences, laughed about the challenges ahead, and offered each other support in ways that felt genuine. For the first time in months, Amber realized she wasn't alone. There were others here, women who understood what she was going through, women who had been where she was and had made it through. When dinner was finished, Mary came by the table with a soft smile. "How are you settling in, Amber?" she asked, her voice full of warmth. "If you need anything, if you need someone to talk to, I'm here." Amber looked around at the women, feeling the weight of her situation for the first time in a long while. But this time, it wasn't the suffocating weight of fear and isolation. This was the kind of weight that made her feel like there was a path forward, a future. "I'm okay," Amber replied, her voice stronger than it had been in days. "I'm okay, thank you." Mary nodded. "Good. Tomorrow we start with some basics: prenatal care, resources, and ways to plan for the future. You'll have everything you need to take the next step." Amber watched as Mary moved on to another table, a sense of gratitude filling her. She had found a place where she could rest, if it was just for a little while, but it was more than that. It was a place that could help her stand on her own feet, that could help her learn to be the mother her child deserved. As the evening wound down and the women started heading toward their rooms, Amber sat back in her chair, the quiet buzz of the shelter settling around her like a cocoon. She still didn't know what the future held, but tonight, for the first time in months, Amber felt something she had almost forgotten was possible: hope. But could hope alone carry Amber through the most difficult journey of her life? As the weight of her pregnancy settled deeper into her bones, the reality of motherhood began to feel both terrifying and empowering. Could she really build a new life, or was she just fooling herself into thinking she was ready for what came next? The next few days at the Hope Center felt like a strange kind of limbo. Amber spent most of her time adjusting to the routine, attending the prenatal classes, getting her first checkup, and participating in group therapy sessions. It wasn't easy. Her body was tired, her mind even more so. But each step, each little moment of progress felt like a quiet victory. In the mornings, she would wake up early and take a walk around the small garden in the back of the shelter, where the women were encouraged to spend time. The weather had started to warm up, and the sunshine felt like a balm on her skin. As she walked, she would breathe deeply, trying to let go of the tension that had built up in her over the years. The anxiety of leaving, the shame she had carried, and the fear of not being good enough for her baby. Each step seemed to slowly release some of it. The other women at the shelter were a constant source of comfort. They weren't just roommates, they were companions in this strange, uncertain chapter of their lives. They had all come from different backgrounds, different experiences, but they shared one thing in common: a deep need for support, understanding, and healing. It was in the small moments, like when Ellie shared her favorite books with Amber, or when Sarah reassured her that the stretch marks and weight gain were nothing to be ashamed of, that Amber began to feel the first stirrings of change within herself. The women weren't judging her, they were simply showing up for her in ways that felt real. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she could breathe without the crushing weight of fear and judgment. The classes had become an anchor of sorts. During the prenatal care sessions, Amber learned more about her pregnancy than she ever had before: how the baby was growing, how her body was changing, and how to take better care of herself. It wasn't just about surviving, it was about preparing for the future, about doing what she could to give her child the best start in life. One morning, as Amber was sitting in the small kitchen preparing breakfast, Mary walked in. She had a kind smile on her face, but there was a seriousness in her eyes. "Amber, do you have a minute?" Mary asked softly. Amber nodded, a little nervous. Was there something wrong? Mary sat down across from her at the table. "I know you're adjusting, and I'm really glad you've been participating in everything, but I wanted to check in with you about something. How are you feeling about the counseling sessions?" Amber hesitated. She had attended a few group therapy sessions since arriving, but she hadn't opened up much. She hadn't been ready to talk about the past. Not yet. "I don't know," Amber said quietly. "It's just hard. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say." Mary nodded, her expression gentle. "You don't have to share anything you're not ready to, but I think it might help if you did. Sometimes just talking about what you've been through can be the first step toward healing. I've seen it make a big difference for many women." Amber's heart thudded in her chest. She knew Mary was right. She had been running from her past for so long, afraid to confront it. But now, sitting in the quiet of the shelter, she couldn't avoid it anymore. The truth was there, always just beneath the surface, waiting to be addressed. The days continued to blur together, each one a mix of small victories and quiet moments of vulnerability. Amber continued to participate in the prenatal classes and counseling, gradually opening up to the other women, learning more about herself and her past. It wasn't easy, but it was progress. One afternoon, as Amber was sitting in the small common area, a piece of paper in her hand, she felt her heart race again. It was the list of available resources and opportunities for after the baby was born. It was filled with options: housing programs, job training, childcare support. Amber stared at it, a sense of panic creeping up her throat. There were so many unknowns in front of her. How would she provide for her baby? How would she navigate the world as a single mother, especially when everything felt so uncertain? She had so many questions, so many fears, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she didn't need to have all the answers. Not yet. What mattered was that she was here, taking one step at a time. She didn't need to fix everything all at once. Her baby, the small, fluttering life inside her, was her reason to keep moving forward. She would make mistakes, she would struggle, but she would learn, and she would fight for the both of them. That evening, as Amber was standing outside watching the sunset, Ellie came up to her. "Hey," Ellie said, smiling warmly. "I was thinking you should join us for a movie night. You need to take a break from all the heavy stuff." Amber smiled back, appreciating the gesture. "Yeah, I think I could use that." As they made their way to the small common area, Amber allowed herself to relax for the first time in days. She was still scared. She still didn't have everything figured out. But for the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for something better. A future that wasn't defined by fear, but by hope and resilience. But Amber knew that true healing would take time. Could she continue to face her past one step at a time, or would it catch up with her before she was ready? And as the future began to look just a little bit brighter, she wondered, what would it take to truly find peace in her own heart? It was early morning when Amber woke up, the sunlight filtering through the small window above her bed, casting a soft glow on the room. For a moment, she allowed herself to simply lie there, listening to the soft sounds of the shelter waking up, the faint shuffle of footsteps in the hall, the quiet hum of the coffee machine downstairs. The world felt peaceful, almost serene, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to feel at ease. But then, as she rolled over and sat up, the familiar tightness in her chest returned. The past. It was always there, just beneath the surface, threatening to pull her under whenever she stopped to think about it. She had been doing well, she thought. She had made progress. She was building a future for herself and her baby. But it was impossible to ignore the haunting memories that lingered in the back of her mind. The sharp words, the angry hands, the emotional manipulation that had drained her for so long. Amber knew it wasn't healthy to keep avoiding the truth forever. The walls she had built around herself were fragile, and sooner or later they would crumble. But facing those memories, confronting the pain of what had happened, that was something she wasn't ready for. Not yet. She stood up and walked to the small dresser across the room, her hand resting on the cool wood as she stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her face looked different now, softer, more worn. But there was something else there, too. Strength. A strength she hadn't known she had, the kind that came from surviving against all odds. Her phone buzzed on the small table beside the bed, breaking her thoughts. She picked it up, her heart racing when she saw it was a message from her mother. "Amber, I'm so proud of you. I hope you're doing okay. We're thinking of you every day. Just remember that you're not alone. I love you." The words were warm, filled with love, but they also carried a heavy weight. Amber felt a lump form in her throat. She had missed her mother's support, missed her love, but she couldn't go back. Not yet. She wasn't ready to face her past. She wasn't ready to explain what had happened to her. With a sigh, Amber typed a quick reply. "I'm doing okay, Mom. I'm safe. Love you too." She hit send, but the words felt hollow. She didn't want to lie to her mother, but she wasn't ready to tell her the full truth either. A knock at the door pulled her out of her thoughts. She opened it to find Sarah, one of the women from the shelter, standing in the hallway with a warm smile. "Hey, you okay?" Sarah asked, her tone gentle but filled with concern. Amber nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just thinking." Sarah raised an eyebrow, clearly not entirely convinced. "About what?" Amber hesitated. She wasn't ready to open up, but something in Sarah's eyes made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she could trust her. "It's just hard sometimes," Amber admitted. "I don't know how to leave all of that behind. It's like every time I try to move forward, the past just drags me back." Sarah nodded knowingly, her expression softening. "I get it. It's not easy to leave that kind of pain behind. But you can, you know. You have to. You've already taken the hardest step. Being here, getting the help you need, that's the start of something better." Amber swallowed hard, her throat tight. Sarah's words felt comforting, but they also stirred something deep within her, something she wasn't sure she was ready to face. "Maybe," Amber said quietly, "but what if I can't leave it behind? What if it always follows me?" "You don't have to do it alone," Sarah said, her voice gentle but firm. "You've got us here. You've got me. And we're not going anywhere." Amber felt a wave of gratitude for Sarah's kindness. She was starting to realize just how much she needed the support of these women, these strangers who had become her lifeline. "I know," Amber whispered, looking down at her hands. I don't know how to let go of it. The anger, the shame, the fear, it's all still there, just waiting to come back." "Letting go doesn't happen all at once," Sarah said. "It's a process, but you can do it. You just have to be patient with yourself." Amber nodded, though she wasn't sure she believed it yet. The weight of the past felt so heavy, so suffocating that she wasn't sure how to begin to unpack it. "I'll try," Amber said, though the words felt weak, as if she were trying to convince herself. "Good," Sarah said with a smile. "And you don't have to do it alone. Remember that. We're all in this together." As Sarah left, Amber stood there for a moment, her hand resting against the doorframe. She was right. She didn't have to do this alone, and that thought, while still a little daunting, also filled her with a quiet sense of peace. Maybe she wasn't ready to face everything at once. Maybe she wouldn't be able to let go of the past overnight. But she didn't have to do it all at once, one step at a time. She walked over to the window and looked out at the city below. There was a world out there full of possibilities, a future that didn't have to be shaped by her past. She could start over. She could rebuild. And for the first time in a long while, Amber allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could leave the past behind. But even as Amber made this quiet promise to herself, she couldn't help but wonder, was she really strong enough to face everything that was waiting for her? Would the past continue to haunt her? Or could she finally find a way to forgive herself and build a future she could be proud of? Amber's days had begun to follow a quiet rhythm at the Hope Center. Mornings were spent in prenatal classes, afternoons were filled with group therapy sessions, and the evenings were reserved for dinners with the other women. There was comfort in the routine, a semblance of normalcy that she had longed for without even realizing it. The fear of the unknown had started to fade, replaced by a tentative hope that had taken root deep inside her. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Despite the warmth of the shelter and the support of the women around her, the shadows of her past still loomed large. Each time she closed her eyes, she could still hear the harsh words, the threats, the hurtful accusations. The memories were there, lingering like an ever-present storm, and no matter how hard she tried, they never fully went away. That afternoon, as Amber walked to the common room after a counseling session, she overheard a conversation that caused her steps to slow. Two women, Sarah and Ellie, were talking quietly by the window. "He's been trying to get in touch with you," Sarah was saying, her voice low but sharp with concern. "I think you need to tell Mary." Amber's heart skipped a beat. Her mind immediately went to the one person she hadn't heard from in weeks, the one person who had caused her so much pain, David. She froze in the doorway, trying to stay out of sight as Sarah continued. "He's been sending messages. I saw one the other day when I was in the office." Sarah paused, lowering her voice even further. "He's threatening to come here. He says he's going to make everything right. But Ellie, he's dangerous. You have to protect yourself." Ellie's voice was a whisper, filled with fear. "I'm scared. What if he shows up? What if he hurts me again?" Amber's stomach turned. She didn't know exactly what Ellie's story was, but it was clear that David wasn't the only one who had left scars on these women. Amber felt the weight of her own fear come rushing back, but she pushed it down. She had to stay strong, for her baby. She stepped back into the hallway, her heart pounding. This wasn't the first time she had heard whispers of David's name, but it was the first time she had heard it with this much urgency. He was trying to reach her. He wanted her to come back. He wanted to finish what he had started. Amber squeezed her eyes shut, the memories crashing into her. His voice, the look in his eyes when he had raised his hand to her. She had left. She had taken the first step toward freedom. But now, with him threatening to come here, she felt the world start to close in again. What if he found her? What if he came to the Hope Center? Her body tensed, the panic beginning to bubble up. She wanted to scream, to run, to hide, but that wasn't the answer. She'd made it this far, hadn't she? She couldn't let him win. She couldn't let fear dictate her life anymore. Taking a deep breath, she walked to the office where Mary was sitting, going over some paperwork. The older woman looked up as Amber approached, giving her a soft smile. "Amber, how are you doing today?" I need to talk to you," Amber said, her voice shaking slightly. "I overheard something. I need to tell you about him." Mary's face immediately softened, her eyes full of understanding. She stood up and gestured for Amber to sit. "Of course. You're safe here. Whatever you need, we're here to help." Amber sat down, feeling the weight of her words press against her chest. She'd never said David's name aloud since coming to the shelter. She had avoided talking about him, afraid that doing so would make him real again. But now, in this moment, she knew she had to face it. She had to speak the truth. "His name is David," Amber began, her voice trembling. He was my boyfriend. We've been together for a while, but he became violent. He started controlling me, telling me I couldn't do things without his permission, and eventually he hit me." Mary didn't interrupt, just listened quietly, her expression never changing. Amber swallowed hard, the words choking her. "I left him. I couldn't take it anymore. But now I think he's trying to find me. I overheard two of the women talking. They said he's been trying to reach me, and I'm scared." Mary placed a hand gently on Amber's, offering silent reassurance. "You did the right thing by telling me, Amber. You're not alone, and we'll make sure you're safe." Tears welled up in Amber's eyes, and for a moment she couldn't speak. The relief of finally telling someone the full truth, of sharing the fear that had been eating at her for so long, made her feel vulnerable. Too vulnerable. But she didn't care. She needed this. She needed to stop hiding from the truth. "You don't have to face this alone anymore, Amber," Mary said softly. "I'll talk to the staff and we'll put measures in place to keep you safe. We'll contact the authorities and we'll make sure he can't get anywhere near here. You're in a safe place now." Amber nodded, her mind still reeling with the thought of David showing up, of him finding her here. But as Mary spoke, Amber realized something important. She wasn't just hiding anymore. She was standing up. She was speaking out. And no matter how terrifying it felt, that was the first real step she had taken toward taking control of her life. As the conversation ended, Amber walked back to her room, her heart still heavy but with a newfound strength. She wasn't going to let him win. She wasn't going to let fear take hold of her again. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, Amber truly believed that she could face it. She could face him, and she would build the life she had always dreamed of, not just for herself, but for her baby, too. But as Amber walked back to her room, her mind raced with the weight of what she had just shared. Was it enough to keep her safe? Would David back off? Or would he push harder, determined to drag her back into the life she had escaped? The walls of protection were slowly going up, but would they hold? The days that followed Amber's conversation with Mary were a strange mix of relief and anxiety. The shelter had taken immediate action to ensure her safety. Alerts had been made to local authorities, and Mary had arranged for additional security measures at the Hope Center. Amber felt a sense of comfort knowing that she was being protected, that the women around her were doing everything they could to keep her safe. But no matter how much reassurance she received, a part of her was still on edge. David hadn't reached out directly since the day she overheard the conversation, but Amber couldn't shake the feeling that he was out there, waiting, watching. Every knock at the door, every phone call, every unfamiliar face she passed on the street sent a spike of fear through her. What if he found out where she was? What if he showed up? She tried to push those thoughts aside, focusing on the small moments of peace she had found in the shelter. She spent most of her time with the other women, trying to adjust to the calm of the shelter life. They shared stories, offered advice, and laughed together. Amber had started to feel like she was part of something larger than herself, a community of women who had all been through their own struggles and had survived them. For the first time in what felt like forever, Amber felt like she belonged. But as much as she tried to find peace, the shadow of David remained. That afternoon, after a session on financial planning for single mothers, Amber found herself standing in the small garden at the back of the shelter. The air was crisp and clean, and the flowers, though still small, had begun to bloom with the arrival of spring. She had taken to spending her free time there, enjoying the quiet and the space. It gave her a chance to think, or, more often, to push back the swirling thoughts that refused to let her rest. As Amber walked along the garden path, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw Ellie, the woman who had first welcomed her into the shelter, walking toward her with a small, encouraging smile. "Hey, Amber," Ellie said, her voice warm. "How are you feeling today?" Amber took a deep breath, glancing at the flowers that had just started to open. It felt like the right metaphor for her life, slowly starting to bloom despite the years of neglect. "I'm okay," Amber replied softly, giving Ellie a small smile. "Just thinking a lot." Ellie nodded knowingly. "I get that. Sometimes you just need to let your mind wander, even if it's not easy." The silence that followed was comfortable, the kind that existed between people who had learned to accept each other's presence without expectation. After a moment, Ellie spoke again. "I was thinking," she hesitated for just a second, "maybe we could go out tomorrow? Just to get out of here for a bit. Take your mind off everything." Amber looked up at Ellie, surprised by the suggestion. She hadn't really thought about leaving the shelter since she arrived, but the idea of getting away for even a short time, being outside, seeing the world beyond the shelter walls, sounded liberating. "I don't know," Amber said slowly. "I haven't really been out since I got here. What if something happens?" Ellie gave her a reassuring smile, her expression soft and understanding. "Amber, you've been through a lot. You deserve a break. And don't worry, we'll stick together. It's just a short trip to the park and I'll be with you the whole time. No pressure. You can always say no." Amber thought about it for a moment. She had spent so much time in survival mode, never allowing herself to think beyond the next day, the next step. Maybe it was time to take a moment for herself, to step out of the safety of the shelter, even just for a few hours. She had to stop letting fear control every decision. "Okay," Amber said, a hint of a smile crossing her lips. "Let's do it. I think I could use some fresh air." Ellie grinned, clearly pleased by Amber's decision. "Great, I promise it'll be good for you. Plus, it'll be nice to have some fun for once." As they made plans to head to the park the next day, Amber felt a small sense of excitement bubble up inside her. It was strange, this feeling of hope that was growing inside her, despite all the fears that still clung to her. She had been running for so long, hiding from her past, but maybe it was time to start living again, to step outside the walls she had built around herself, and to begin to trust that the world could still hold good things. The following day, Amber and Ellie set off for the park. As they walked through the streets, Amber noticed how different the world seemed when she wasn't looking over her shoulder, when she wasn't afraid. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and people were walking by, lost in their own lives. Amber felt like she was part of the world again, not just an observer, but someone who belonged. They arrived at the park, and Ellie led her to a bench by a small pond. The air smelled fresh and earthy, the sound of the water lapping at the shore a soothing backdrop to the laughter of children playing nearby. For a moment, Amber closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the sun wash over her. "You know," Ellie said after a while, "it's okay to feel happy again, Amber. You've been through hell, but that doesn't mean you can't find peace. You've earned it." Amber opened her eyes and looked at Ellie, feeling a lump form in her throat. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to her like that, so long since anyone had given her permission to be happy. "I don't know if I can ever completely let go of the past, but maybe for the first time, I'm starting to believe that I can have a future, that I'm worthy of one." Ellie smiled gently, her eyes filled with understanding. "You are worthy, Amber. You're already on your way." Amber looked out over the park, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The future was still uncertain, and she knew there would be moments when the past tried to pull her back. But for now, in this moment, she was free. She was safe. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that she had the power to shape her own future. But as much as Amber tried to find peace, the shadow of David remained. Could she keep moving forward without the shadow of David looming over her? Would the life she was building hold up under the pressure, or would it all come crashing down when she least expected it? The next few days felt like a delicate balancing act for Amber. On one hand, she was moving forward, slowly but steadily, learning to trust herself again, participating in classes, and embracing the support of the women around her. On the other hand, there was the looming reality that David was still out there. His messages, although infrequent, still haunted her. The fear that he would show up, that he would find her and drag her back into the nightmare she had escaped, never fully left her mind. But for the first time, Amber allowed herself a sense of peace. She spent more time with the women at the shelter, each conversation helping to unravel some of the knots that had tied her up inside for so long. She allowed herself to laugh again, to enjoy the little moments, like the time Sarah had taught her how to bake banana bread, or when Ellie had dragged her out for a walk in the park, insisting it would help clear her mind. For the first time in months, Amber felt like she was reclaiming a piece of herself that she had thought lost forever. One afternoon, after a long counseling session, Amber decided to take a break in the shelter's small garden, feeling the need to center herself. The breeze was cool against her skin, and the garden's flowers, now in full bloom, gave off a faint, sweet scent that calmed her. She walked along the stone path, letting her thoughts drift as she watched a couple of butterflies dance lazily around the flowers. She had just sat down on the bench near the pond when she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. Looking up, she was surprised to see Mary, the intake coordinator, walking toward her, holding a folder in her hands. "Amber?" Mary called gently. "Got a minute?" Amber straightened up, a little nervous but curious. "Of course. What's up?" Mary smiled warmly, but there was something in her eyes that told Amber this wasn't just a casual visit. "I just wanted to check in with you," Mary said, sitting beside her on the bench. "How have you been feeling? Is everything going okay?" Amber hesitated, looking out at the pond for a moment. She had been doing better. There were moments when the past didn't seem to control her every thought, but she still carried the weight of fear, of uncertainty. "I'm doing okay," Amber said, her voice soft but steady. "Better than I was, anyway. It's just, sometimes I feel like the past is still right behind me, like it's just waiting for me to slip up." Mary nodded, understanding in her expression. "That's completely normal, Amber. Healing isn't a straight line. It takes time. But I can tell you've come a long way since you arrived here, and you're not alone." Amber smiled at her reassuring words, but before she could respond, Mary's expression shifted. She looked down at the folder in her hands and then back at Amber with a more serious look. "There's something I need to tell you, though," Mary said quietly. "I don't want to alarm you, but we received a call this morning. It's from the police." Amber's stomach dropped, her heart pounding. The thought of the police was enough to make her blood run cold. Had David done something? Was he trying to get involved with the authorities? Mary seemed to notice the tension in Amber's body. "It's not what you think," she added quickly. "It's about David. He's been trying to contact you, but there's something else." Amber felt her breath catch in her throat, her body bracing itself for bad news. "Has he done anything?" Amber asked, her voice tight. "Is he dangerous?" Mary hesitated for a moment, her gaze dropping to the folder in her hands, and then back at Amber with a more serious look. "They've said they've been tracking him and that he's been getting increasingly aggressive. He's been sending messages and they believe he might try to confront you. They want to know if you'll cooperate with them, if you'll come in and make a statement." Amber felt her legs go weak, the tension in her body rising. The idea of seeing him again, of confronting him, was almost too much to bear, but she forced herself to stay calm, to listen. I don't know if I can do that," Amber whispered, her voice barely audible. Mary placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Amber, you've already done the hardest thing, leaving him. Coming forward with the truth is another step in taking your power back. It doesn't have to be today, but it's an option. You don't have to face him alone. We'll help you through it." Amber took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She was tired, so tired of feeling like she was always running, always hiding. This was her chance to end it once and for all. But the fear, the anxiety was overwhelming. "I'll think about it," Amber said after a long pause. I don't know." Mary nodded, standing slowly. "Take your time. Just know that if you decide to go through with it, we'll be here to support you. You're not alone in this." As Mary walked away, Amber sat there for a long time, her mind spinning. The thought of facing David again filled her with dread, but she knew it was something she couldn't avoid. She had to confront him, had to find a way to take control of her life completely. She stood up, her legs shaky, and walked slowly back into the shelter. The weight of her decision was heavy, but she knew it was a necessary one. She couldn't keep running. She couldn't keep living in fear. For herself, for her baby, she had to find the strength to fight back. As Amber walked back into the shelter, a new sense of resolve was beginning to take hold of her. But would facing David bring her the closure she desperately needed, or would it be the final test of her strength? One thing is certain, she wasn't running anymore. But was she ready to face him and all the fear he represented? The days following her conversation with Mary felt like a blur. Amber had never felt so torn in her life. The police had reached out again, urging her to come in and make a statement about David. The thought of facing him in any capacity, even through the law, was suffocating. She kept replaying the conversation in her head, how David had always been so convincing, so manipulative. What if he tried to twist her words? What if he made her feel like everything was her fault again? But there was another side to this. She couldn't keep running from him. She couldn't keep letting him control her, even from afar. He had taken so much from her, and now she had the chance to take something back, the power to decide her own future. Amber spent hours sitting alone in her room, staring at the walls, the familiar weight of indecision pulling at her. She could feel the baby shifting inside her, reminding her of the stakes. She had come so far, farther than she ever thought she could. She had built a semblance of peace surrounded by women who understood her, who helped her believe in her own strength. But this was different. This was real. This was the fear that had chased her for months now, the fear that had controlled her life for far too long. The knock on the door startled her, and she looked up to see Sarah standing there, her eyes full of concern. "Hey," Sarah said softly, stepping inside. "You okay?" Amber nodded, though the tightness in her chest betrayed her calm demeanor. She forced a smile as Sarah closed the door behind her. "I'm fine," Amber said, but Sarah didn't buy it. Sarah had always had a way of reading Amber's emotions, even when she tried to hide them. "Amber, I know you've been dealing with a lot," Sarah began gently, sitting down beside her. "But I need you to know something. Whatever you decide, you don't have to go through it alone. You've got us here. You've got me." Amber looked at her, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. She had never realized how much she needed this kind of support, especially after everything she had been through. She had spent so many years hiding the truth, suppressing her emotions, trying to pretend that everything was okay. But here, in the shelter, she was slowly learning that it was okay to lean on others. It was okay to let people help her. "I don't know if I can face him," Amber said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." Sarah placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You've already been strong, Amber. You've already made it through so much. Coming forward about what happened, well, that's just another step. You've got this." Amber closed her eyes, feeling the weight of Sarah's words. She had to find a way to do this. She had to do it not just for herself, but for the baby. She couldn't let David control her any longer. "I'll do it," Amber said, her voice firmer now. "I'll go to the police. I'll make the statement." Sarah smiled, relief flooding her face. "I knew you would," she said softly, "and we'll all be here for you. I'll go with you if you need me to." Amber nodded, appreciating Sarah's offer, but she knew this was something she had to do on her own. It was a moment of reckoning, a moment that would shape the rest of her life. The next day, Amber made her way to the police station with a mixture of dread and determination swirling inside her. Her heart pounded as she walked through the doors, the familiar sounds of the station, phones ringing, officers talking, filling the air. She had never been involved with the police before. Her encounters with them had always been tainted with fear. And now, here she was, about to confront the man who had been the source of so much of that fear. She was escorted to a small room where 2 officers were waiting. One of them, a woman in her 40s with short, dark hair and a warm but no-nonsense expression, introduced herself as Officer Hayes. "Amber, I know this is difficult," Officer Hayes said kindly, sitting down across from her. "But we're here to help you. We just need to know what happened." Amber nodded, her hands shaking as she folded them on the table in front of her. She felt the urge to retreat, to pull back into the shell she had lived in for so long,
but she pushed it down. She had to be strong. This was her chance to take control of her life. She began, her voice faltering. I don't even know where to start. Take your time, Officer Hayes said gently. We're here to listen. Whatever you're ready to share, we'll be here to help. Amber took a deep breath, her eyes flicking to the door for a brief moment before looking back at the officer. She couldn't do this halfway. She had to tell the whole truth, every painful detail. I met David a few years ago, she began slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. At first, he was everything I thought I wanted. Charming, kind, thoughtful. But over time, he started changing. He became controlling, manipulative. He would tell me what to wear, who I could talk to, where I could go. If I didn't do things his way, he'd get angry, he'd scream, call me names, and sometimes he'd hit me. Amber paused, the weight of the words sitting heavy in the air. It felt surreal speaking these words out loud, acknowledging the violence that had become such a constant part of her life. But as she continued, something shifted inside her. She was speaking her truth. She was taking back the power that had been stolen from her. He told me I was worthless. He said no one else would ever love me, and I believed him. I stayed with him because I thought I didn't have anywhere else to go. Amber's voice broke, but she pressed on. And then one day, I couldn't take it anymore. I left. The room was silent for a long moment, the officers listening intently, their expressions filled with empathy. Officer Hayes spoke softly, her voice calm. You did the right thing, Amber. Leaving him was the bravest thing you could have done, and now you're giving yourself the chance to move on. Amber nodded, feeling the tears that had been building up in her eyes finally slip down her cheeks. She didn't care anymore. She was done hiding. She had to let it out. When she was finished, Officer Hayes gave her a comforting smile and stood up. Thank you for sharing that with us. We'll take it from here. You're safe now. As Amber left the police station, she felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and relief. She had done it. She had spoken her truth, and though the future was still uncertain, there was a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. She wasn't running anymore. But as Amber left the station, the reality of the situation set in. She had taken the first step in reclaiming her life, but was it enough to ensure David wouldn't try to hurt her again? Would he back off now, or would this be the beginning of an even bigger battle? One thing was certain. Amber had made a decision. Now she had to face whatever came next, head on.
The days following Amber's visit to the police station were a blur of emotions: relief, anxiety, fear, and hope. She had done something that just weeks ago had felt impossible. She had stood up to David, shared the truth about what he had done to her, and taken the first step toward taking control of her life. But even as she felt a small sense of victory, there was still an undercurrent of fear. What would happen next? Would David retaliate? Would she be safe? The police had assured her that they were taking her case seriously. They had given her information about a restraining order and explained the process for seeking protection. Amber had felt comforted by their support, but the uncertainty still lingered. Could a piece of paper really keep David away? Could a court order truly protect her from the man who had once controlled her every move? For the first time in months, Amber allowed herself a small taste of normalcy. She spent time with the women at the shelter, continuing to build connections, and tried to focus on preparing for the arrival of her baby. She had spent so much time focusing on the fear of the past, on the weight of what had happened, that she had forgotten what it felt like to look forward. But even as she began to plan for her baby's arrival, the shadows of her past never fully disappeared. She would wake up in the middle of the night, her heart racing, imagining David's angry face or hearing his voice in her head. The nightmares still came, though they were less frequent than before. It was like a part of her was still trapped in the pain, unable to fully escape the memories. One afternoon, as she was sitting in the garden, lost in thought, Sarah walked over and sat beside her on the bench. "You okay?" Sarah asked, her voice soft with concern. Amber looked up at her, trying to smile. "Yeah, just thinking. I keep wondering if I'm doing enough. I mean, I'm doing everything I can, right? But sometimes it feels like nothing's enough."
Sarah placed a hand on her shoulder, giving her a reassuring squeeze. You're doing everything you can, Amber. You're here, you're getting the help you need, and you're preparing for the future. That's more than enough. Amber felt a lump in her throat as she nodded. She wanted to believe that, to truly believe that she was doing enough. But the weight of her past kept pressing on her, reminding her of the things she couldn't control. She had taken back control over her life in some ways, but there were still so many things outside of her reach. I don't know what the future will look like, Amber said quietly. I don't know how I'll feel after the baby's born or if I'll ever feel truly free of everything that's happened, but I'm trying. And that's all anyone can do, Sarah replied gently. You're trying, and you're succeeding more than you think. It's not about being perfect, it's about moving forward, even if it's one small step at a time. Amber nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek as she let out a deep breath. It was hard, harder than she had ever imagined, to face the reality of what had happened. But every day she was learning to move through it, and maybe that was enough. The next few days passed in a quiet blur. Amber kept herself busy with prenatal classes, meetings with Mary about housing options, and visits to the local clinic. She even started to organize the small room she would be staying in after the baby arrived, creating a space filled with soft, warm colors, a small crib, and a few baby clothes that Claire had brought over. It wasn't much, but it was hers, and that felt like the beginning of something new. One evening, as she was sitting alone in her room, going through a list of potential names for her baby, she felt the familiar buzz of her phone. She glanced down, her heart skipping a beat when she saw that it was a text from her mother. Amber, I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I know you've been through so much, but I want you to know that I love you and I'm proud of how strong you've been. I'm here for you whenever you're ready to talk. Amber stared at the message for a long time, her emotions swirling inside her. She had been avoiding her mother's calls and texts for weeks, still not ready to face the truth of what had happened. But this message, it was different. It wasn't about judgment or guilt. It was just love. And in that moment, Amber realized how much she had missed that love. With shaking hands, she typed a response. I love you, Mom. I'm not ready to talk about everything, but I'm safe. I'll reach out when I can. Thank you for being patient with me. As she sent the message, Amber felt a strange sense of relief, as though a small weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She wasn't ready to share everything with her mother, but the small act of reaching out, felt like the first step toward rebuilding that connection. Later that evening, as Amber lay in bed, she thought about the future. The baby, the new life she was about to bring into the world, the journey ahead. It wasn't going to be easy. She knew that. The past would always be a part of her, and there would be moments when the fear and the doubt crept back in. But she also knew that she had changed. She had learned to stand up for herself, to ask for help, and to trust in the strength that had always been inside her. Her future, once clouded by uncertainty, was starting to come into focus. It wouldn't be perfect, but it would be hers, and that was enough. But even as Amber began to find peace in the present, she couldn't shake the feeling that the past was always just a step behind her. Would she ever truly feel free from the hold it had on her? Could she step fully into her future? Or would the shadows of David's abuse continue to follow her, no matter how far she ran? The days that followed Amber's decision to reconnect, however tentatively, with her mother were quieter. With each passing day, she felt the weight of her decision lift just a little more. It wasn't about everything being fixed, it never would be, but she was learning to move forward, bit by bit. The baby grew stronger inside her, and she found herself daydreaming more often about the future. A future that, while uncertain, seemed just a little bit brighter. But peace, she quickly realized, was often fleeting. It was a sunny afternoon when the knock at the door startled Amber, interrupting her thoughts as she worked on a small quilt for the baby. The fabric was soft and calming, the repetitive stitching providing her with a rare moment of solace. She wasn't expecting anyone, and instinctively, her heart rate picked up. The sound of footsteps in the hall only added to the unease crawling up her spine. Before she could get up,
The door swung open, and Mary stepped inside, her expression immediately serious. "Amber," she said softly, closing the door behind her, "there's someone here to see you." Amber's heart skipped. The first thought that hit her was that it was David, that somehow he had found her. Her breath hitched, and her hands instinctively moved to protect her growing belly, as if she could shield her baby from whatever was coming. "No," she managed to whisper, panic threatening to rise. I can't. It's him, isn't it?" Mary quickly crossed the room, placing a calm hand on Amber's shoulder. "No, Amber, it's not David." Amber felt herself slowly relax, though her heart was still pounding in her chest. Her breath came in shallow bursts as she tried to steady herself. She couldn't handle any more surprises. Not today. "Then who?" Amber began, but Mary interrupted her. "It's your mother," Mary said gently. "She's here. She wants to talk." Amber froze. Her mind went blank for a moment, and the words felt heavy in the air. Her mother? Here? Now? I didn't think she'd come," Amber whispered, still in shock. She hadn't expected her mother to show up at the shelter, not after everything that had happened between them. She wasn't ready to face the weight of the truth that her mother didn't yet know everything. How could she? How could Amber ever explain what had happened to her, the things she had endured? "She's waiting in the common room," Mary continued, her voice warm but firm. "She's been through a lot herself, Amber. She's been asking about you, wanting to help. If you're ready, she's here." The words felt like they were being pulled from her, and Amber couldn't shake the sense that this was another turning point, another decision she had to make. "I don't know if I can do this," Amber said, her voice thick with emotion. "What if she's disappointed in me? What if she's angry?" Mary's gaze softened, and she knelt down beside Amber, her eyes meeting hers with quiet understanding. "Amber, she loves you, and no matter what, she's not here to judge. She just wants to be there for you." The silence stretched between them, Amber's mind spinning with 1,000 thoughts. Her mother had always been there for her, through the good times, the bad, even when Amber had felt undeserving of it. The guilt, the shame, it all came rushing back, and Amber struggled to breathe through the wave of emotions. "I've avoided this for so long," Amber said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "I don't know if I can explain it all. Not yet." "You don't have to explain everything right now," Mary reassured her. "This is just about seeing her, about being open to the possibility of healing. You don't have to do it all at once." Amber nodded slowly, her heart still in turmoil, but with the tiniest flicker of hope. She didn't have all the answers, and maybe she never would. But maybe, just maybe, this was a step towards something better, towards something she could build, piece by piece. Taking a deep breath, Amber stood up, her hands trembling as she smoothed the fabric of her dress. She was about to face her past head-on, a past she had spent so long hiding from. But this time, she wasn't doing it alone. "Okay," she said softly, finding strength in her decision. "I'll go talk to her." Mary gave her an encouraging nod, and Amber slowly made her way to the common room. As she opened the door, her mother looked up from the small couch where she had been sitting. The moment their eyes met, something shifted in Amber's chest. Her mother's face softened with emotion, and her eyes filled with tears. She stood up, arms open, and Amber felt a flood of warmth and tenderness sweep over her. It wasn't about words. It wasn't about explaining everything that had happened. In this moment, all that mattered was the unconditional love in her mother's eyes. Amber hesitated for only a second before stepping into her mother's embrace. She let herself melt into the comfort of her arms, allowing herself to feel the love and safety she had denied herself for so long. "I'm so sorry, Amber," her voice whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there when you needed me." Amber pulled back slightly, looking into her mother's tear-filled eyes. "It's not your fault," she said, the words escaping before she could think about them. "I didn't let you help. I didn't want you to know how bad it had gotten." Her mother shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "But I should have known. I should have been there." Amber cupped her mother's face gently, wiping away a tear with the back of her hand. "You are here now, and that's what matters." For a few moments, neither of them spoke.
The silence between them was thick, full of years of unspoken words, pain, and regret. But in that silence, something was beginning to heal. Amber felt it, a thread of connection, of understanding, of a bond that was still strong despite everything that came before. "I'm so proud of you, Amber," her voice said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "You're so strong. You've come so far." Amber closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the weight of her mother's words. She had spent so long feeling unworthy of love, unworthy of forgiveness, but in this moment, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she was worthy of healing, of peace, and of the future she was working so hard to build. But even as Amber allowed herself to feel the warmth of her mother's embrace, the question still lingered in her mind. Could she ever truly let go of the past? Could the love and support she was finally accepting be enough to heal the wounds that ran so deep? Or was there still a long road ahead, filled with difficult decisions and painful confrontations? Amber spent the following days surrounded by the warmth of her mother's presence. Their time together was not without its moments of awkwardness and uncertainty, but the love between them was undeniable. Amber was still working through the layers of guilt, shame, and fear that had built up over the years, but with her mother by her side, the weight didn't feel quite as heavy. It was like the first rays of light breaking through a stormy sky. Her mother had stayed at the shelter for a few days, helping Amber with small tasks and offering the comfort she hadn't known she'd needed. They talked about the baby, the future, and the pain of the past. Amber found herself sharing pieces of her story, pieces she hadn't been ready to speak until now. It wasn't easy. It was raw, messy, and emotional, but for the first time, Amber didn't feel the urge to hide it. She was beginning to see her pain not as a burden, but as part of her journey, a journey that had brought her here, to this moment of connection, of healing. As the days went by, Amber's sense of peace deepened. She was taking steps toward a future she had once thought impossible. The police had placed a protective order against David, and though he knew it was still possible he could try to cause trouble, Amber felt a small but growing sense of control over her own life. She had confronted her past in ways she never thought she could. And though she was still healing, the process felt like it was unfolding in front of her, slowly but steadily. The shelter had become a place of refuge, not just from the threat of David, but from the isolation she had once felt. The other women had become more than just people she shared space with. They were her community, her support system. Amber had learned from each of them in ways she never expected. She saw their resilience, their strength, and in turn found her own. One afternoon, after her mother had left to visit family and Amber had returned to her routine at the shelter, Mary pulled her aside. "Amber, there's something I've been meaning to tell you," Mary said, her voice filled with the usual warmth, but now tinged with something else. Concern, perhaps, or hope. "You've come so far in such a short time, but I think you're ready for the next step. Have you thought about what happens after the baby is born?" Amber's heart skipped a beat. The question had been lingering in the back of her mind for some time, but she hadn't allowed herself to think about it too deeply. "I don't know," Amber replied honestly. "I'm still processing everything, still getting my feet under me. I don't know what comes next." Mary smiled gently. "That's completely understandable, but I think you're ready. There are housing programs available for women like you, women who are rebuilding their lives, and you've shown so much strength in the last few weeks. I think you could make it on your own, Amber. It's a lot, but I know you have it in you." Amber's mind raced as she processed Mary's words. The idea of leaving the shelter was daunting. The shelter had been her safe space, her security blanket. It had kept her safe from the world outside, from the fear and uncertainty that had once felt like it would swallow her whole. But now, with the support she had, with her baby growing inside her, and with the new connection she had made, she knew she couldn't stay in the comfort of this place forever. "I'm not sure I'm ready," Amber said quietly, the vulnerability in her voice unmistakable. Mary's expression softened. "You don't have to rush into anything, but when you're ready, there's a path forward for you, and we'll be here to support you every step of the way." Amber nodded, feeling the weight of her decisions settle in her chest. There was so much to consider. She still had so many fears, but now she also had a foundation of support, and that made all the difference. For the first time, Amber allowed herself to imagine a future, one where she was independent, where she could create a safe and loving home for her child. The next few weeks were filled with anticipation and preparation. Amber continued to attend her prenatal classes, met with counselors, and planned for the baby's arrival. She took small steps each day, like gathering the last of the baby's things, filling out the necessary paperwork for her housing application, and learning to balance the love she felt for her baby with the fear that still lingered. Then, one afternoon when she was sitting in the common room, holding the tiny outfit she had bought for her baby, Ellie walked in with a bright smile. "You know," Ellie said, sitting beside Amber, "there's something really beautiful about you, Amber. You've been through so much, but you've come out the other side stronger. You have this light about you now, and I can see it. Your baby is going to be so lucky to have you as a mom." Amber felt the tears rise in her eyes, but this time they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of hope. Ellie's words hit deep, and Amber finally understood what they meant. She was healing. She was becoming the person she had always wanted to be, despite everything she had gone through. "Thank you," Amber whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for believing in me." And as she held the tiny clothes in her hands, she realized just how far she had come, from a woman trapped in fear and shame to one standing tall, embracing a future filled with hope. As the days grew shorter and the baby's arrival drew nearer, Amber knew there would be challenges ahead. There would be moments of doubt, moments when she wondered if she was truly ready, but there would also be moments of grace, of strength, of love, and of peace. For the first time, Amber felt like she was walking into the future, not running away from it. But even as Amber stepped forward, one foot in front of the other, she knew that the true test of her strength was still ahead. Could she really build the life she dreamed of, or would the echoes of the past continue to haunt her? The road was long, but Amber was no longer afraid to walk it.